Thank you, Josh. Well, all eyes on Washington this morning, where lawmakers are negotiating to avoid hitting that debt ceiling we've been talking about. Now, at the same time, Republicans are gearing up for the race to the White House.
25 News Washington correspondent Joe St. George there live. Good morning, Joe. And is there any progress from this latest meeting between the president and the Speaker of the House? And Joe, how could that default impact us?
Yeah, it's the biggest policy and political story happening right now in the country. There's no doubt about it. The country's never defaulted before, and we've never inched this close to a default since 2011. In that case, lawmakers ultimately came up with a solution. That is what a lot of people here on Capitol Hill believe will ultimately happen, but we're not there yet. A 10-letter word's been used on Capitol Hill this morning to describe yesterday's meeting at the White House: productive. Productive is how President Biden described the meeting. Speaker McCarthy described it as productive as well, but there's still no deal. There's some agreement on some low-hanging fruit items like unspent COVID stimulus dollars, some perhaps agreement on permitting reform that would speed up infrastructure energy projects in Texas and around the country. But there remains a philosophical division on how big the federal government should actually be. Both sides are tens of billions of dollars apart. It's important with this debate to remember what's at stake. We can have on screen for you, again, what would happen if a default would occur, potentially in early June, as early as June 1st, according to the Treasury Department. And in that scenario, the Treasury Department would have to prioritize what gets paid. They would have to see, okay, what do we have and what can we pay? Just like a household would have to if there's no income, if someone was laid off and doesn't have a paycheck in a certain month. Things like Social Security checks, military pay, federal workers' salary, all could be at risk. Of course, many economists have warned that a temporary default could cause a mini recession in this country, rattle the markets to such a degree that it would result in many layoffs. So a lot to watch here. I think a lot of Americans, certainly a lot of Texans, are used to lawmakers getting things done in the 11th hour. How many government shutdown fights have we covered over the years, right? But we're following this so closely because what happens if they don't get it done in the 11th hour? And there would be a lot of impacts for a lot of people.
And Joe, it's a big week for Republicans, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott is launching his presidential bid, and then you have Florida Governor Ron DeSantis expected to follow as well. But what kind of an impact could this have on the race heading into the summer?
It's starting to get crowded, isn't it? And it certainly feels that way. Senator Tim Scott announcing on Monday he starts his campaign with over $20 million in the bank. He's spending $6 million in campaign cash early. He's not polling particularly well, but he has a lot of resources that perhaps he could generate some buzz in a place like Iowa or a place like New Hampshire. He's already a well-known name in South Carolina, which is an early primary state. As far as Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, if he gets in the race, as it looks like he may in the next 24 to 48 hours, he would represent the biggest challenge thus far to former President Donald Trump, who, we should be very clear, is the undisputed frontrunner in this race. Real Clear Politics has his lead at around 36 points or so right now. I think the biggest question is, does any of these candidates really go after the former president and attack him head on? He's vulnerable on issues like recent indictments, January 6th, but so far we haven't seen candidates do that. We've seen candidates want to promote themselves, their vision for America, their vision of what the Republican Party should look like, as opposed to taking on the former president head on. By the way, the field could grow even more crowded in the coming days and weeks. Former Vice President Mike Pence is said to be making a decision soon as well.
All right. Joe St. George live from Capitol Hill. Good to see you, Joe.